Hey guys, it's Sarah, and today I'm going to be doing my June TBR. So I'm pretty excited for this video. Part of it is because I've just kind of completely ignored my May TBR. It's because I've been in a little bit of a reading slump, but also because I'm going easy on myself in the month of June. And by that, I mean, I'm not giving myself books that, I have a harder time making myself pick up, if you know what I mean. So my poll for June was authors that I've read only once that I really loved, and I wanted to pick up another of their books. So I decided that my kind of theme for June would be authors that I really enjoyed books by. Not just that I've read only once, though I will do some of those, but just in general, authors that I think either that I'll really love or have really loved in the past. And I'm gonna read more books by them. I'm also shortening my TBR just a little bit. Normally I have a total of 14 books in my TBR. I'm shortening it by 2 books. So I'm gonna have a total of 12 books on my TBR. And I'm really excited for it. So we're gonna go ahead and just get into this. So first of all, for my classic book for the month of June, I'm planning on reading The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. So H.G. Wells is a classic sci-fi author that I've read almost all of his books. One of my favorite book by him is The Time Machine. I absolutely love The Time Machine, but I've read several of his other books, including The War of the Worlds and The Island of Dr. Moreau, and I've liked pretty much everything I've read by him. Now, mind you, I did see the trailer for the movie for The Invisible Man, which really bumped this book up on my classics list because it looks like such an interesting movie. It's also a horror movie, which I didn't expect because H.G. Wells, while The Island of Dr. Moreau was definitely more on the horror side rather than sci-fi, I really think of H.G. Wells as a sci-fi author, not a horror author. So I'm excited to see what this is. I'm still expecting it to be more sci-fi than horror, but I don't know. We'll see. I like some of the themes and things that he brings into his books, so I'm definitely excited to get to this one. And then my reread for the month of June is going to be An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. So I read this book, I want to say when it first came out, and I didn't have a whole lot of expectations for it. Hank Green is obviously the brother to John Green, and they also have YouTube channels, and I watch them a lot on YouTube, and I like John Green as an author, so I decided to try Hank Green's book because it's new adult sci-fi, which is just right up my alley. It's the exact kind of book that I would like, and I loved it so much. I was so surprised by how much I loved this book because it's not sci-fi in the way that you would expect it to be sci-fi, but it's still really good. And the sequel to this book is coming out in July, which I'm really excited for. So I want to reread the first book because it's been a while and I don't remember that much about it other than the fact that I really loved it. I don't own a copy of it, but hopefully I can get a copy before the end of the month because I'm really excited for the second book and I really want to reread the first book in anticipation. Talking about new releases, another book that I'm planning on reading in the month of June is Network Effect by Martha Wells. So this is a new release from the month of May. It just came out. This is the 5th book in the Murderbot Diaries, and it's the first full-length novella, which makes me really excited. Murderbot Diaries is about an artificial intelligence who is basically a murderer, but at the same time prefers to watch television than actually doing its work. So it has a really interesting backstory and personality that I absolutely love, and I'm really excited to get to the 5th book in the series because I've been saying from the beginning we need a full-length novel for the Murderbot Diaries because it's just too good not to have one. So I'm so excited that there is one now, and I'm really excited to get to it. And apparently, I'm going to be reading a lot of sci-fi in the month of June. I didn't realize this till just now, but I also plan on picking up Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuval. Also, in the month of April, I picked up The Test by Sylvain Neuval, and it completely blew me away. I wasn't expecting to love that book half as much as I ended up loving it. It was one of my favorite books of that month, and it just made me want to read more books by this author. Sleeping Giants is the first book in the Themophile series, which is a series that I've been meaning to pick up for a while and just haven't gotten around to it. So now that I've picked up another book by this author and ended up really loving, especially the way that it was written, I'm so excited to get to this one. All I really know about this is that it's a sci-fi series. It's written in kind of like an epistolary sort of format, but with multiple forms of media, not just letters, which is similar to the Illuminate Files, which I really enjoyed the Illuminate Files, especially the format. I actually really love the format. So I'm hoping that I'll love the format in this as well. And I feel like in the hands of Sylvain Neuval, who is a fantastic author from the one book that I've read by him, I think that this could be really good, and I'm really excited to get to it. So I definitely didn't realize I was reading that much sci-fi in June, but apparently that's what I'm craving to read right now. But I decided to read something a little bit more on the horror side, and that's Misery by Stephen King. I knew when I decided this theme for the month that I was gonna read at least one book by Stephen King. I hadn't decided which book, but I decided to go with one of the shorter ones that I've been meaning to read for a while. So this one is about an author who meets their biggest fan who kidnaps them and tortures them or something like that. Like literally worst nightmare for an author sort of scenario. And it's Stephen King, so I feel like this is gonna be amazing and I can't wait to get to it. I'm also really glad that I chose one of his horror novels and not one of his sci-fi novels, because I didn't realize until just now that I was reading that much sci-fi in this month. So I'm excited to have something that's a little bit different, and Stephen King does a great job of writing horror. And I'm really excited to see all of the terrible things that are gonna happen in this book. Okay, so now for the part of the video that you guys actually came to watch, which is the fantasy that I'm going to be reading in the month of June. I have 2 fantasy books on my TBR. This is in addition to my fantasy book series challenge, of course. The first fantasy book that I have on this TBR is An Echo of Things to Come by James Islington. This one is pretty big, so I didn't want to put too many books on this TBR, and I feel like this one is going to be super easy for me to read. Earlier this year, as part of my fantasy book series challenge, I read the first book in this series, which is A Shadow of What Was Lost, and I was surprised by how much I actually loved that book. I loved the characters, I loved the world, I really loved some of the tropes that it used. And while I do think that the book had some flaws in it, I really just loved being in that world. It gave me the feeling of being in a high fantasy novel that I'm always looking for, and it just felt like coming home, if you know what I mean, when I was reading that book. Like, it was the type of book that it just makes me relax into the story, and I absolutely love that about it. So I feel like this book is the sequel to it, will make me feel kind of the same way, which is what I'm going for in the month of June, and I'm really excited for it. Also, the way that first book ends makes me really want to continue on with the series. I knew I was going to continue on with it pretty soon after I finished it, and I'm really excited to get to it in June. And before we get to my reading challenges, I have one more book on this TBR, and that's Tigana by Guy Gavriel Kay. So I haven't actually read anything by this author before, but I've heard such great things about him from multiple people, and I've been meaning to pick up his books for years. Like, I mean, at least a decade, I've been meaning to pick up books, especially this one in particular by him, because I've heard that this is kind of his masterpiece, and I've heard so many good things about it. So I think it's time that I finally pick it up. Like, this is definitely gonna be a 5-star prediction for me. I'm so excited for it, and I cannot wait to get to it. I don't know that much about it other than it's historical fantasy. It's very heavily political, and it has beautiful writing, and that it's just all of the things that I look for in books. So it's potentially going to be one of my favorite books of all times, and I cannot wait to read it. So now that we've gotten through all of those, which I am all really excited for, it's time to get to my challenges for the month. So the first challenge I'm going to be talking about is my Unwrapped book challenge. So these are books that I had planned to unhaul, but I decided to give one last chance before unhauling. So I wrapped up these books, and every month I unwrapped 2 of them, and I'm supposed to read them by the end of the month, or I have to unhaul them. So let's go ahead and see which books are for the month of June. So we got this first book, so let's see what it is. So we have Girls Made of Snow and Glass by Melissa Barshardoust. I don't really know that much about this book other than it is a YA fantasy book, but like that's kind of all I need to know. Like, I feel like this will be a pretty quick read, hopefully. It seems to be a retelling of Snow White, which I do enjoy retellings, and I'm excited to see how this one does. It looks like potentially a darker retelling, because the idea of Girls Made of Snow and Glass, particularly glass, makes me think of something that's fragile and breakable. So I don't know. I feel like this one could potentially be really good, and I'm excited to get to it. And then we have my second book, so we'll see what this one is. So we have House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farmer. I don't know very much about this one. Other than it's an award-winning book, which is why I ended up picking it up because I've heard a lot of people say really good things about it. It seems to be a YA sci-fi book that's maybe about cloning or something like that. Definitely something to do with genetics. That's all I can tell from the back, but it's intriguing. So I'm excited to see if I'll end up liking this one as well. Now it's the time of the video that I'm always the most excited for, and that's my fantasy book series challenge. So I got a bunch of fantasy book series in here that I've been meaning to read for years, and I'm gonna pick out 2 of them this month, and by the end of the month I'm supposed to read the first book in both of those series to decide whether I'm gonna continue on with those series. And this is definitely always my favorite part of my TBRs, and I'm really excited. So let's go ahead and see what I pick out. Sorry, that's upside down. Okay, so we got the Shattered Seas trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. So the first book in the Shattered Sea trilogy is Half a King, and I'm really excited for this because Joe Abercrombie is one of my favorite fantasy authors of all time. I absolutely love his First Law series. This is his YA series though, so I'm a little skeptical about it, but we'll see. Hopefully I'll end up liking it and I will continue on with it. I don't know that much about it. I've heard that it's similar to the First Law, but like almost like a watered down version, but I don't know. We'll see, and hopefully I'll end up liking it. It does seem like it is maritime fantasy from the fact that it's called the Shattered Sea trilogy, and I love a good maritime fantasy, so I'm definitely excited to get to it. But it also really fits my theme for the month, which is authors that I love, because Joe Abercrombie is definitely an author that I love. And I get to pick one more. That one, I did it again. There we go. So we got Mistborn Era 2 by Brandon Sanderson. So by Mistborn Era 2, I mean the second trilogy in the Mistborn series. I haven't read it yet. The first book in that trilogy is The Alloy of Law. And I feel like I'm like just getting really lucky with these picks right now because Brandon Sanderson is also an author that I really love. I'm a little hesitant with this one. Out of all of the series in this fantasy book series challenge, the only one that I've tried to read in the past is The Alloy of Law, and I ended up DNFing it. So I don't know how this is gonna go. Like, I'm really hesitant, but I'm hoping that I'll end up liking it because I've heard really good things about the later books in the series, especially The Bands of Mourning. I've heard really, really good things about that one. So hopefully I can get through the first one and I'll like it enough to continue on with the series because I feel like it's one that I could potentially really love, especially because I already know I love the magic system and the world in this series. So I can definitely end up loving this if I can love the characters, because I feel like that was the reason why I didn't love it the first time around. And lastly, it's time for my poll. So the winner of my May TBR poll for the book that I'm going to be reading in June is Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. So this is a retelling of one of the Greek myths, which is about Achilles, obviously. I'm actually pretty excited for this. Like, I wasn't so sure about it. I had a feeling that it was going to win the poll, and then like it won out everything like by a mile. Like way more people voted for this than any of the other books, and I think it was because it's fantasy, because you guys like picking the fantasy book that I put on the poll. So I was a little hesitant because out of all of the books that I had previously read that was on the poll, Circe was the one that I probably liked the least, but I still really loved it. And the Song of Achilles was definitely a book that I plan to read on eventually. And I love Greek mythology, and Madeline Miller is a fantastic author, so I'm excited to read it. We'll see. Hopefully I'll end up loving it. So now it's time for my poll for July, and because you guys like picking fantasy books, they're all going to be fantasy books in the month of July, because my theme for the July poll is going to be classic fantasy written by female authors. One thing that I found, it's really hard to find good like classic fantasy written by female authors, and by classic fantasy I do mean like not in the current decade, so fantasy from before the current decade. I found that books that I've had from that time by female authors, I do really enjoy, but I don't get a lot of recommendations for them. So I've been looking up quite a few of them, and I picked 5 of them that you guys can vote on for me to read in July. I don't know very much about any of these books, but they're books that are highly recommended by female authors that I consider to be kind of classic fantasy. I went ahead and took some notes from Goodreads about each of the books, so of just my take on based off of the Goodreads summaries. so I'll read those out for you guys. So the first book that you guys can vote for is Lion of Senet by Jennifer Fallon. So what I got from the Goodreads like summary is that it's kind of about a friendship between two second sons. It's also deeply political, and it's obviously set in a high fantasy world, and there's an ambitious high priestess. It's also a very unique world because there are two suns, so there's never actually nighttime, which like gives me reminiscent feelings of like Nevernight by Jake Kristoff. But while Nevernight was not one of my favorites, I'm hoping this one will be, because it is definitely an interesting world that I would love to get to know better. The next one on this list is Black Sun Rising by C.S. Friedman. So this is probably the most popular of all of the books that are going to be on this list. I don't actually know that much about it, but I feel like other people might know more about it. And the Goodreads summary was very, very short. Like, it was literally one paragraph. It's about 4 people that come together to defeat evil forces. There's also something about demonic fae and a soul-crushing force that preys on the human mind. So that's pretty interesting. So the next book on this list is The Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. So in this one, a broken man comes back home and becomes the tutor of a princess, maybe? It's a high fantasy set in a royal court, and there is a heavy romantic subplot. And then there's also something about a maze of demonic paradox, damnation, and death, which, I mean, sounds all up my alley, so I feel like I'd like this one. So the next book on this list is The Etched City by KJ Bishop. So this one is about a gunslinger and a sergeant who are on the run, and they go to a city which they become immersed in a world where art infects life. Like, those exact words, art infects life, which I think is a pretty interesting choice of words, and I'm excited to see what that's about. And the last book that you guys can vote for is The Bone Doll's Twin by Lynn Flewelling. And this one, there are like mysterious deaths and something about a line of warrior queens, and then the main character, I believe, is the king's nephew, Tobin, who apparently was changed at birth by dark magic and is actually a girl in disguise. So the ultimate girl pretending to be a boy trope. Even she doesn't realize that she's a girl, apparently. And that just sounds really intriguing to me. So that is all I have for you guys. If you've read any of these books, let me know down in the comments, because I would love to discuss with you guys. So I post videos on Sundays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, so consider subscribing. If you'd like to be notified as soon as I upload, you can click that little bell icon. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.